welcome to Daily Spark TV. I am Dr. Angela Butts-Chester. My guest today is Daryl Unnasch, and we are talking about his book, Principally Driven. I know, such an intriguing title. Well, let me tell you a little bit more about Daryl. He has earned a Ph.D. in Educational Leadership from Northwestern University. He has been a public and private school administrator and college instructor. He is the author of the book displayed here, Principally Driven. Thank you so much, Daryl, for being on the show with me today.
My pleasure.
Now, I have to ask you the question that I ask all of my guests, and that is, what makes you, you?
Well, I was born on a dairy farm, real humble beginnings, and I am still very humble today. I know some of you don't think so, but I am. But anyway, to answer your question, I think today I'm the combination of a lot of things, in addition to my education and my experience, but knowing a lot of wonderful people. And it occurred to me the other day as I was coming here that how wonderful people are. You know, we criticize Americans a lot, but there are a lot of very nice people who are helpful and want to help you, want to do things for you. But anyway, the experience of working with so many different kinds of people and children up through high school and college, and their parents, most of whom were nice, but some of them were not, you know, has made me who I am today. Also, I think accepting Christ as my Savior when I was a small child has made me the person that I am today, and has helped me along the way when I had difficulties, when I didn't know what the answer was. I knew where to find the answer. Like yesterday, the suitcase that I was just telling you about, man, I was praying about that one. And fortunately, it came out okay. But there's always something that's plaguing me, and I went through it the worst time of my life 2.5 years ago when I lost my wife. And that has really had a terrible impact on the worst 2.5 years of my life.
Yeah.
And so my number one goal today is actually to find some way, well, of course there is only one way, I guess, to remove that title at the end of my name, widower.
Widower.
And so all of that kind of describes who I am today and where I'm going. I've been very fortunate. I had a wonderful life, except for the last 2.5
Yeah.
Terrible.
I think I'm so sorry to hear about the passing of your wife.
Thank you.
I think it was Dr. Maya Angelou who famously wrote that we are more alike than we are unalike.
I would agree with that.
And I think that if we concentrate on the things that bring us together, because there's always going to be something that we can disagree about.
Right.
But if we concentrate on the positives more than the negatives, then I think we could be a happier people together. So I have to agree with you on that. Now, you mentioned that you grew up on a dairy farm. So my next question for you is, do you think that the environment in which children are raised, be it that it's rural or urban or suburban, do you think that that has an effect on who they become later in life?
Oh, I think without a doubt it does. And it does mean that one kind of environment is superior to another. Some of us do well in a rural environment, and some of us in a more of an urban or suburban environment, and I've been in all three. But I always knew as a child that that's not where I wanted to spend the rest of my life. I didn't enjoy it, didn't like it, and looked forward to the day when I graduated from high school and I could do something else. Whereas my brother, who is my brother, is much different than I am in that he runs a dairy farm, a large dairy farm today. He loves it.
Right. You know, I think you said a mouthful there in that we have to understand that each of us have been called to do a certain thing, and we need to appreciate the character traits, the personalities, our various abilities to do what we need to do the way that we need to do it. A farm is beautiful, but I agree. I don't think that I would do very well on a farm, but someone has to be able to do well on that farm, and it's people like your brother. I think that's an amazing thing to be able to acknowledge that and say, thank goodness for each type of person that there is in the world, because we all hold a particular function in making sure that the world continues to spin the way that it spins. Now, one of the things that you mentioned is that over the past few years, you have done research to formulate your book, and you have looked at 75 years of education. You've looked at how it has changed, pros and cons, and I would love to ask you about a few different ways in which it has changed. The first way is, I say gender needs, but I'm looking at, have things changed for education when it comes to what men would need and what women would need in an educational system?
That's a rather difficult question to answer. I was reflecting on it last night. I think maybe it hasn't changed as much as we think. I think that teachers are more respected today than they were, let's say, 30, 40 years ago, and that they recognize how important it is to have a good living and a happy living, to have an education. It opens up more avenues, more opportunities for you, which creates happiness and contentment and a few other things. But I think that today teachers are better educated. They're better paid. In fact, I've worked in the northern suburbs and in Florida, and the northern suburbs are paid very well, 6 figures, a lot of them. And in Florida, it's much different. They have to work in the summer in order to survive. And I used to tell them, well, you have a choice. You can work up north where it's cold, or you can work and make a lot of money, or you can work down south where it's warm and not make a lot. So we've learned today we have to make
judge
choices.
for yourself. When it comes to racial equality, or the view in which race is understood, the importance of, the diversity of, do you think that that has changed when it comes to education over the past 75 years?
Dramatically. Dramatically. I think about where I grew up in Minnesota. It was 100% Caucasian, 100%, and nothing but Protestants and Catholics. There was no other religion, either that or no religion at all. And I'll give you part of an example of how bad it was. When I was in college, I had a professor who was profoundly anti anything but the Caucasian. And one day a student said to him, doctor, and I'm not going to say his name, even though I'm sure he's gone by now, what would you do if your daughter married a black man? He made the most dramatic, horrible statement that you can think of. I'm not even going to repeat it here, but it would illustrate just how bad it was. Plus, nothing happened to him. I mean, today, they'd grab him and throw him in jail for making such a horrible statement. But that's what I grew up in, and everybody was prejudiced. There was no allowance for people of other races. We didn't have any Asians or Mexicans or Hispanics. It was 100% white. Now today, of course, it's changed. I've changed. I mean, I have to admit that I had prejudice back in those days, and I don't feel that way at all anymore. And as I look around the country, I think we have all changed. Well, I shouldn't say all. Most of us have changed greatly and accommodate other people's views and the way of doing things, and maybe the way they dress, and et cetera. It's a much better place. I've known people now from other countries, and they don't have the extent of the prejudice, for example, in South America, that we do here. It's who you are. Doesn't matter what color you are or what your ancestry is. And I think we're learning that, and we've come a long ways.
Absolutely.
I believe. Yeah.
Absolutely. I have to agree with you on that. And I think it is just not only do we evolve and grow as a people, I think in the individual growth that allows us to evolve and grow as a country and find that what Dr. Angelou said is quite true. We are more alike than unalike. Well, it is time for us to take a very short break, but don't worry, we'll keep this conversation going on the other side. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for a Daily Spark TV. So, Dar, we were talking about your review and research that you did for your book and looking at the past 75 years. As far as education is concerned, the pros, the cons, and how we have changed. I'd like to continue that line of questions with you. My next question is dealing with technique of teaching, retention for students. Do you feel that teachers have evolved in the way in which they teach? Have we gotten better as students?
Well, they have evolved, and in some ways they've evolved in the wrong direction. One practice that they were using here until just, I guess, maybe a few months ago, they went overboard in terms of testing. They're spending, in some cases, almost half of the time testing students. Now, who in the world made that kind of a decision? I don't know. I have to say, what is wrong with the superintendents allowing that to happen? If you're spending 50%, well, it's sort of like saying, well, you ain't learning if you're not studying. If all you're doing is taking tests. And fortunately, now we've moved away from that, because kids weren't learning. All they're doing is learning how to take tests.
How to take the test,
Yeah. I don't even know whether they learned that very, very well. So that's one thing. I think also some of the changes curriculum-wise, for example, in social studies, you ask some student, where's France, or where's Paraguay, or some other, and they wouldn't have any idea which continent even to look at.
Right, that's true.
Yeah, and in some other ways they've done better in the sense that they've helped, I think, for us to get rid of the prejudice that we've had. I think we're more open-minded there, and I think there's an affection for kids that's very important. I remember a teacher that I hired some years ago. I had an opening in a non-public school, so I didn't need all the credentials. And she was a parent in the school, just wanted to teach so bad, loved kids. So I finally said, all right, I'll hire you, and for a second grade class. And she came in all summer and just beautified that class. It was absolutely gorgeous. She did everything to make it beautiful, and she was so happy. The kids came in that first day, these second graders, and it went along for just a few days, and she lost the enthusiasm. And it was so bad that she and her husband came in and talked to me. She was crying at night. It was so bad. And one of the things that intimidated her, if you've ever looked at a second grade curriculum, the second grade teacher's manual for reading is about that thick. Some of you, if you've ever looked at a second grade curriculum, it's crazy. It had totally intimidated her, scared her to death. And I finally said, well, if you are not ready for this or you don't want to do it now, it's okay. We'll find somebody else. Right. She was embarrassed, I think, to have to leave after that. But she left, and we all left with a smile on our face, because I had somebody waiting at the door who wanted the job. She took it, finished out the year in flying colors, no problem at all. And so those things happen. And I, as the principal of the school, perhaps should have been more sensitive to the fact that she didn't have all this training and maybe she'd have trouble. But her enthusiasm just bowled me over, I guess. And,
well, it sounds like it was a wise move on both of your parts. She was forthcoming. She said, hey, this is too much. You recognized it to be the truth that it was, and you were able to fill the slot, and she was still able to complete her year and though it may have been a little embarrassing, it wasn't the end all of the
No.
story. So that's a good bit.
And her
That's a good
husband
bit.
still loved her.
And it still ended up being a good year. I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. Now, when it comes to parent involvement, has parent involvement changed in that same 75-year time frame that you researched?
Well, I don't know if you've heard this term. We have the term today, helicopter parents.
Yes.
Have you heard that? You've heard that. Okay, probably most of you have too. That just hover over the school almost, watching everything their child does. Is he going to do something wrong? Is somebody going to pick on him? And all that type of thing. I don't know how serious a problem it is. It's one that we kind of laugh at, I guess. So in some respects, parents have become more involved and less likely to side with the school, and more likely to side with their child. We really have come to the point where we have to protect, it seems like, our child from everything, even though it's really usually not necessary. Kids can take care of themselves for the most part, and if they don't, then somebody ought to do something about it. And what I read about or hear about a child being picked on in school, and the principal just sort of, okay, so we had a little problem. It's not just a little problem. If you're
Right.
8, 10, 12 years old, it's a big problem.
Absolutely.
And we have to protect children, and I don't know if we're doing that as well as we used to. If a kid picked on me when I was in 4th grade, my dad would be in the car over to see his parents. And maybe he was too protective. He wasn't protective in many other ways.
But the conversation was I think a little different. That there was the ability and the willingness to have conversation to
Right.
figure out what was going on, as opposed to simply accusation as to what was going on. It was, let's have dialogue and let's figure out how we can fix it. I think you're onto something there. If there's one thing that you think that we could work on for this year, as far as education is concerned, what do you think that one thing is? Of all the things that we've named, of all the things that we've talked about, what is one thing that we could do to make it a little better this year?
Well, I think we could all be more sympathetic to the view of the other person, whether it's the teacher or the parent. They both have to listen. They can't take a superior point of view. We have parent-teacher conferences, and sometimes it's difficult. I was in a school some years ago, a high school that was very poor, perhaps one of the poorest in the country. It was in Virginia, which is, I guess, where we are now, right? The Eastern Shore? Anybody know where the Eastern Shore is? Virginia? Anyway, the only way we'd get parents into school is if we would provide a dinner in the evening for them. In many cases, they didn't have a car.
Yeah.
And even if they got transportation, they were afraid to come in. But the food would lure them in, and then we could talk to them a little bit. And it wasn't that we tried to intimidate them or scare them or anything.
Right.
You know, we're pretty warm people. Teachers are warm, friendly, usually.
Yeah, usually.
I mean,
yeah.
there's some exceptions. Some principals are idiots. But we're generally fairly reasonable people, and that's our job. And we wanted to be successful at it. We don't want parents to run away scared or say, "Oh, I'm not going to go to that school. That principal, the way he treated me the last time, I'm not going to go back there." But I think that'd be one way that we can always concentrate. How can we do it better? And there's always got to be a better way. We can.
I like that answer. How can we do it better?
Yeah.
Because there's always a better way.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, it is time for us to take a very quick break, but don't worry, we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daryl. This is my book, Principally Driven, and I know you'll want to pick it up at Barnes & Noble or Amazon or any of the other bookstores.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark TV. So, Dar, I want to ask you about the typical school day.
Typical what?
The typical school day. So many times when we talk to students, they say, school is boring. I don't like going to school. It's more fun if I stay home or, when I socialize with my friends. What are some ways do you think that we can make the school day more interesting for our students?
Well, undoubtedly, we could do a better job in that area. But before even doing that, I think parents have to be reminded that this is not just an entertainment place
Right.
when your kid comes to school. It's hard work, and they have to recognize that. So they can't go home crying, "Oh, what a boring teacher this is, or a boring class." It means work. But over the years, I've observed hundreds of teachers, and some of them are better than others. And sometimes it's difficult to say why this is. I've walked in classrooms that were just kind of electric with excitement. The kids were happy to go in there.
Absolutely.
And anticipated a good time together with their classmates, with the teacher and the subject matter and so on. What teachers really need to do, well, they need to do a number of things. One, they have to do a lot of planning, because what is a great class today, if you continue doing that, 2 weeks from today, kids are going to say, "That is the most boring class I've ever been in." And it is boring. So teachers have to have a lot of tricks up their sleeve, a lot of ways they can change it, or just make slight alterations. It doesn't have to be entirely different. But also, the leadership of the school has to think of things, and sometimes they almost overdo it, like having ball games between the 5th grade and 6th grade, or the 11th grade and the 12th grade, or the teachers plus versus the kids, or something like that. And of course, entertainment at the end of the day is okay occasionally, as long as you don't make a habit of it, because what it's all about is of course learning whatever the subject matter is.
It is school after all.
It can't be all entertainment, but teachers do have to have that skill. And I've watched some, I thought, man, she is really good at it. And then other times I think, man, and it isn't always intelligence either. I've had some really bright teachers who couldn't teach, and the kids couldn't stand them. And then I've had teachers, when I hired them, I thought, well, they don't seem to be the brightest person in the world, but they seem to be okay. And they get into a classroom and they'd be wonderful. Because some of us have a skill that comes out in the classroom that's very effective, but the skills we have outside the classroom don't work inside the classroom. So it works both ways.
And you're so right, because I can think of a few teachers, different subjects, that they were amazing teachers, and I looked forward to, I liked going to school, but I actually looked forward to going to their class in particular, because it was fun. And like you said, it was the mixture. There were some days where it was, okay, today we read. Today it's conversation. I ask you a question, you tell me what you read, and it's exchanging knowledge. And other days it was a little more relaxed, and it was fun, and it was, tell me about what you've learned. And you appreciated the mix. You appreciated the fact that the teacher wanted to hear from you as much as you needed to hear from the teacher. So you're right. It does need to be that happy balance.
I think of one thing also, that in every classroom probably there is some student who is very intimidated. He's very inward. He's not an outward kind of person. He needs to be stimulated and recognized. And I was the kind of kid in school, and I'm thinking of high school now, I was very shy. And I was not outgoing. Not like you think I am now. But I remember I had a couple of teachers who singled me out and recognized me, and it did more for my ego than anything imaginable. Not that I probably needed so much ego, but I was not one who was always raising his hand and giving answers. And one of the things that I still remember this teacher doing was single me out to go and run an errand for him. And I thought, he's asking me to run an errand for him? It did more for me psychologically than anything else he could do. And he was a great man. He was later elected mayor of the
Oh,
town.
awesome.
So he wasn't, a strange individual.
Right.
And then I think of two other teachers I had, an English teacher and a social studies teacher. The English teacher, her favorite students were girls. She had the girls up front, and the boys were all treated like second-class citizens.
Oh, no.
She did not like boys.
Oh, no.
Not like boys. And the other teacher, I don't think she had favorites, but she always made me feel like I was important. Not that she singled me out all the time, but she just had that quality about her that when she talked to me, she made me feel good and that I was important in the classroom. So teachers have to try to develop these qualities where they can recognize students and help them to grow, because there are some in there who are actors. Some kids who want to be on stage all the time. In fact, I told a teacher some years ago, not very long ago, I said, you're only recognizing certain kids in your class, and they are strutting around the class trying to be the girls, trying to be recognized by the boys. And so they're doing all sorts of things so they're recognized. And I said, in the meantime, the kids who are well-behaved and nice and do their work, they're sitting there so nice in class waiting for you to start class.
Yeah.
And so there's that thing that very difficult to deal with. Very difficult to deal with.
Yeah, school is definitely not the same place that it was when I was in high school.
No.
And I have friends that are high school teachers, and I randomly send them text messages just saying, God bless you today. I hope you make it to Friday.
Yeah.
Because it's difficult, and the students are not the same types of students. So it takes a different type of teacher to reach the kids nowadays. So it is definitely a chore.
Good point.
Well, yeah,
Yes,
it really is, and we have to try to do all we can to make sure that not only can the students learn, but that the teachers have an environment in which they're able to teach.
Well, that's a good point too. Absolutely.
Well, last question for you, and I would love to be able to talk to you more about this, but unfortunately we do run out of time. So my last question for you is this. How do you think that your faith has played a part in making you the person that you are today?
Well, because I don't recognize I am preeminent in the universe, or even in my town, or in my school, or wherever I may be, or in this meeting. That I'm one of many, and I trust God to help me. And I do a lot of trying to remove that word that's at the end of my name. And I mentioned that in my priority list, it's God, family, and friends, in that order. And I've tried to live that. I've failed. I haven't always lived that way, but I want to, and I hope that I've been successful most of the time. Today, some interesting things are happening to me. I happen to go to one of the largest churches, mega churches in the country, 28,000 people every Sunday.
Oh, wow.
It was started by a football coach in his living room, and it grew to a church, then another church, and another. And there are 11 churches today.
Oh, wow.
As a result of this, and they've asked me to get involved in the leadership of the church.
That's
and,
awesome.
And I say leadership. I don't mean I'm going to be up front leading things.
Right, but
I don't want
in
to
the
do
leadership.
That. Yeah, I don't want to do that. But things like greeting people in different places in the church and at the door and so on. And I do like to meet people. You've probably since that.
And leadership is more than just being the pastor of the church. It could be an elder or a deacon. It could be an usher or a greeter, or it can simply be that person who goes over to every new guest and says, welcome to my church.
That's
just
right.
being that person who is an example of God's light. So I can understand that. I can understand that. Well, Dar, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I have enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope that you have enjoyed spending time with us as well. I hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you. Well, until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Bye-bye.